switch on your camera.
Yeah, sure.
You can hear me?
Yes, all good.
Yeah, okay. We can start?
Yes.
Okay. Good afternoon, good evening, good morning. Hi friends, I think this is one more interesting session about the technology, which is from CyberGurukul. Welcome to all attendees and the core member of CyberGurukul. I think today we are going to have some very interesting session by Subramanian from Fortinet, who is the advanced technology head director for Fortinet. Okay, he's going to give us amazing learning on the network technology and security. Let us welcome Subramanian for some interesting session. Hope all you are going to participate and make the session more interesting by asking some interesting questions and making the session more meaningful. Thank you. Over to Harsh.
Sure.
Yes.
I would definitely love to take that part, but let us first take Vijay out.
Yeah, so thank you, Satish, and all the participants for joining. And Satish, thank you for this introduction. I take this opportunity to warmly welcome entire CG family to the modern Gurukul, the Cyber Gurukul. Let me now take privilege to say a few words about our cyber hero, Mr. Subramanian Subu is an Harvard-educated professional having 2 decades of rich experience in cybersecurity industry. We are privileged to have thought leaders like you for this session. Subu grace our platform with his expertise in cloud security, SOC, digital rights protection, ZTNA, and application protection, etc. He has worked across various Steam OEM vendors like Checkpoint, FireEye, Cisco, and currently is part of Fortinet. Now, before I loop in Harskor, who is our founding member of CyberGurukul, some words from Subu, and then we will set the context.
Good evening, everyone. And firstly, thank you to the the Cyber Gurukul family. It's a privilege to be here, and I look forward to mutual learning here. Right? I mean, I'm not here to teach anyone anything. I'm here to learn as well. Cybersecurity. If there's one thing that I've learned in being in this industry for 20 years, it is that you can never say I've learned something. Everything keeps changing every day. So I really look forward to the session. Thank you so much, Cyber Gurukul team.
Thank you so much, Subu. Trust me, it's an equal privilege, equal honor to have you. And today I'm really excited to reimagine cybersecurity with this CSMA, kind of a theory, which really, makes me also very curious to learn. So we're going to, grab a lot of learnings today, but let me first, have a heartfelt gratitude, and thanks to you for coming, in this session. I understand a accomplished thought leader like you, joining today's platform, you would have to juggle too many things up. So it means a lot. So thank you so much once again, and warmly welcome to Subu as well as the core members and the extended family. While we will be very soon, joining. CG is going to continue, of course, its journey to enable, engage, and empower. We will very soon also coming up with another new avatar. But before we do that, today we are here to decode the what and how of this platform-centric security story, which has become a very critical need and in point of discussion for the business leaders and InfoSec professionals. And I know we all are here to, dig deeper with Subu's insight here. So let me quickly set the context and move forward. So Vijay, can you please move to the next slide, please? And here is where I would be, requesting everyone here to help me out as well. See, when we talk about times like today in this modern era, especially after that pandemic-induced digitization, cybercrimes, which was once an organized business, is today a whopping $6 trillion economy in itself, just after US and China. Indeed, this digital economy today has become a, very well connected, dependable world, right? This is a period where we are, in the testing times of cyber warfare itself. Yes, the pandemic has been a boon and a curse as well. We do know the grim reality in terms of the cybersecurity story. And that is what we are going to dig deeper currently. When I talk about this modern era, we have seen today attack don't happen in silos. And the bigger reality is that its impact, disastrous impact, is also not in silos. Can you go back, Vijaya? I will let you know when we have to move. Thank you so much. So, continuing with this story, the kind of cybersecurity challenges that each of the business leader, the InfoSec professional faces here. Let me take this opportunity to hear out from some of the audience, what is it that comes in your mind, those pain points that really strikes in testing times like today. So let's hear out some thoughts. You can use the chat box and you can also share it by, unmuting yourself. Maybe we can start with the core members. Shashank, can I take the privilege to first welcome you here?
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, I hope I'm audible.
Yes, very much.
My name is Shivram. I'm working in industry since 3-4 years, just the starting of my career. And the main point which we are discussing here, the most of the companies or customer which I have realized, like customer totally focusing the integration or like the cyber security, the exact, like in every industry, they have every solution, PIM, PAM, MDM, DLP, CASB, proxy, everything. So like complexity of the solution is the main pain area, or the integration point is the main, because whenever we have the complexity or the integration is the main pain area for the customer, because they are wanted to cover the ISO frameworks or industry standpoint, but they are losing some integration gaps.
So very true. Shivram, thank you for joining us today, and a very well, input. Bridging that gap between the compliance and the protective, pointed products definitely creates a lot of complexity in the environment.
Yeah.
So point very, very well taken. Any other thoughts that comes in mind?
No, I think
no
that's...
worries. We can also have others sharing their thoughts out here.
Yeah.
I think technology is available, but I think skill sets are missing. And integration, I think since many of the people prefer to have multi-vendor approach for implementation security solution, but I think you don't get a single window to manage all the security. So you need to have multiple windows, multiple controls to handle the situation.
I think really that is so true and valid in today's environment. Multiple consoles, multiple products, and with that, the skill set issue. I think Satish, you really hit the nail. A challenge. Attack don't happen in silos, but maybe we are in siloed environment, and even in terms of the skill sets.
And if you try to consolidate the vendor, then you are not very sure whether we are getting the right solution to handle all the issues.
Vendor consolidation comes at a cost. So that is something I'm sure each one of us thinks about. So true. So I think compliance, vendor consolidation at a cost, the people element, the skill set issue, the multi-vendor, multi-product, kind of strategy that we sometimes have to have multiple consoles, again, increasing the complexity and the risk. Very true. We can have maybe one more thought as well over here before continuing.
Yeah, so Shashank here, Harsh. Yeah, so rightly pointed by Satish and even the young gentleman, from his thought process of integration. But I guess we rightly said about from a detection and prevention perspective. But as I can see, attacks, attack is evident. I come more from an incident response angle, because I believe that attack will definitely happen. And controls will definitely let me know that what is the extent of damage. But what about the incident response as to what what is the extent of damage, and what all, has been, put in place to at least remediate it. So it's all about incident response and remediation. I guess that also is still in silos, because as you rightly said, attacks don't happen in silo. I guess the remediation is much more complicated. So I guess the visibility, not just from detection and prevention, but also from incident response, is what is really required. Yeah.
I think this is the point I'm sure Subu will also dig deeper into. And yes, visibility. Silos are not only in the visibility, detection, response, but also getting that RCA, getting the threat defense, getting the incident response, which is very critical for the remediation. So because there are this pointed product story, unless, there is a kind of, we break these silos, we may not be able to become and bring that proactive strategy as well. So this is the foundation that we will be digging deeper into. So let's I think we've got a couple of kind of insights into what is exactly happening today. What are those Herculean challenges coming up around us? Vijay, can we just go to the next slide? And at this point, I think that's the precise reason, like Shiv also mentioned in between, partially, simplification, integration, automation is the principle that each one of us think we need to follow. But of course, it's easier said than done. Convergence is the key. We talk about people, process, technology, the convergence, the people get kind of issue. It's no more just a tool which will help us out. But when it comes in action, these are the challenges. Can you go to the next slide, please? Yes. We will be, covering the challenges, that actually in action needs to be covered. But yes, this is a well-known fact. Even if I have to talk about Gartner, by 2024, the architecture that we are going to talk about today, cybersecurity mesh architecture, this is actually going to help us multifold in, solving multi-solution problems. And the financial impact of such security incidents should relatively reduce. This is something which Gartner says. I'm sure we will be digging deeper into this. And maybe if there's another side of the story, that also Subu will cover. So before handing over to Subu, can I just have another slide, Vijaya? You'll have to put all the points. Yes. So what overall are we going to do today to dig deeper, not into the what, but also how is combat the security complexity and the threats, close this interoperability gaps that we are talking about from the visibility, detection, remediation kind of concept, converge the people process technology, and equally critical, cross-domain security analytics. Yes, that is something we will be discussing quite a bit. And finally, putting this in action with Subu's insight. So with this, Subu, let me hand over the dais to you and dig deeper into this story. And I'm sure you already have lots of hopes and kind of responsibility out here today.
Thank you so much, Harsh. Just please let me know once my screen is visible.
It is.
Okay, perfect. All right, so without much ado, I think you've had a great introduction from Harsh on the topic. So without much ado, let me dive straight into the meat of the presentation. This is the agenda for today. The idea is, I just start at where, how we were doing cybersecurity. Traditionally, from there, we look at the evolution of cybersecurity, the modern day challenges, to how, CSMA can actually help. Should we even adopt CSMA? And if yes, then how do we adopt CSMA? And what are the different approaches within CSMA? So I'm going to be touching upon all of these. Obviously, each of them are broad topics in themselves. So I'll try and do as much justice as I can to each of those topics. So the first thing, the way that we were doing cybersecurity traditionally for years, right? I mean, I've seen this industry from the time when customers asked, why do I need a firewall when I have an antivirus? To the time now when customers themselves call us and ask us, what's new in the cybersecurity industry? What more can I actually implement? What other security controls Can you tell me what's happening from a threat perspective? At a time, I still remember customers not wanting to give us time for us to even speak about our product, to a time when customers are calling us themselves and asking us for more gyan, which is a 360-degree change that I've seen in this industry. Obviously, from a traditional perspective, we always had multiple layers. We looked at, defense in depth was the strategy. For those of you that haven't been around for so long, defense in depth, from the time I was talking about, from antivirus to firewall, and eventually when people warmed up to the idea of cybersecurity, everyone decided that we will have multiple layers within the network to protect our assets. And for those different layers, different vendors were preferred because we wanted a defense in depth strategy. And what was defense in depth? Defense in depth was that if vendor 1 is not able to catch something, the vendor 2 in the second layer would probably be able to catch it, because both their databases are different. So the whole cybersecurity framework revolved around databases, signatures, and lists. Who updates their database first? Who sees a particular threat first? If my database is updated, then I'm protected. If my database is not updated, then I'm not protected. If it's a 0-day attack, then I'm not protected because it's 0-day. Nobody knows about that particular attack. So the whole thing revolved around databases and threat intel that the vendors had, because of which customers said, I will adopt a defense in depth strategy. Maybe if McAfee is not able to catch something, Symantec might catch it at a different layer, or Trend Micro might catch it at a completely different other layer. So, and prevention was a focus in all of this. Everything was on premise, everything was standalone, and the whole thing was vulnerability focused. We were looking at plugging vulnerabilities in the network, which was okay until the whole thing was kind of in a controlled environment within certain limits. But that is where the threats evolved. The main part behind the threat evolution was actually the finance behind the attacks. Once the attackers had enough money pumped in, the attackers started looking at innovative new strategies to compromise organizations. And also the evolution of IT in general. We started looking at more and more applications. When digitization started, from having around 50 applications to start off with, any organization, if you had walked into, probably let's say mid 2000s, you would have seen an organization having around 50 applications running in an enterprise. To suddenly, within like a 5-year time period, the number of applications that an organization started running also just exploded. So the whole strategy of trying to plug vulnerabilities just failed, because you have too many holes now, you have too many applications, you just can't plug all of them. And because the attackers had a lot of money, because there was a lot of incentive for them to be innovative, there came the 0-day attacks. The attackers started looking at vulnerabilities which the vendors did not even know. And they when I talk about a 0-day attack, there are different forms of 0 days. It could be a 0-day sample, it could be a 0-day destination, it could be a new attack technique, and it could be a combination of all of these that comes into a 0-day attack. And when a 0-day attack happened, obviously all the databases failed because it was not seen. A database is like, if you know the person, you can stop the person as being a bad guy. But what if it's a new person who's not in your database, comes up and does something bad? And the whole thing failed. And also that was the time when the APTs came into existence. Until the APTs, if you looked at the threat landscape was such that the attacker had to individually compromise each of those systems. The attackers, what I would call as hit and run kind of an attack. Disruption was the key focus. They wanted to bring down networks. They wanted to stop something from happening, send a virus, crash the system. You reformat your back running on feet and it's all right. But when APTs happened, APTs were a completely new breed of attacks. They were low and slow attacks where the attackers took not days, not weeks, they took months and years to compromise a network and reside within the network. It was not a hit and run attack. They resided within the network, they started stealing information, and they started gaining out of it financially. And a lot of APTs were perpetuated by state actors too. And this really changed the whole threat landscape. And then came the ransomware evolution in the past decade. After the APTs, it was the ransomwares which took over from there. While APTs still reside, ransomware became the primary threat of focus for everyone. And ransomware also evolved. Initially, for a ransomware attack to work, the attacker had to encrypt each system individually. If an attacker has to compromise your system, he had to have contact with your system to actually encrypt it. And that was not scalable even for the attacker. And that model wasn't working. And that's where the attackers changed their model. They used nearly a 15-year-old technique, which was the technique of worms, which we used to see people from late 90s would know about, late 90s and early 2000s would know about worms a lot. And the ransomware started acting like worms. One system gets infected, then everybody starts getting infected. The ransomware spread by itself, and that gave the magnitude and scale. So the attacker did not have to worry about targeting a crown jewel, targeting about, for example, a lot of times in the early stages of a ransomware attack, attacker would reach one endpoint, encrypt it. That used to be a non-critical endpoint. So customer would just say reformat, let's start using the system again. But once this happened, now ransomware, all it needed was one system to be compromised, and then it spreads from one system to another. The whole network goes down to the stage today that we are at, wherein it is not just a ransomware today, it's extortion today. Attackers do not tell you that today. They don't come back and tell you, you know what, I've encrypted your system, you need to give me money, I will give you your data. Because they know that most of the customers have a backup today. When you have a backup, you're not going to pay the attacker. So what the attackers do is today they steal the data first before encryption. They store the data with themselves. And then they say that if in case you don't pay me, forget about recovering the data. I will publish your data in internet. I will publish your client data in internet. In fact, in Kaseya ransomware, the attackers sent a message to all the clients of Kaseya saying, your data is now with us because of this compromise. And if you and them don't pay us, then we will publish your data. Now, this puts customers in a legal soup. Now, that's where ransomware has become. Now, ransomware has come to a stage where it is extortion. It's not just ransomware anymore. And the problem is, cybersecurity also had to evolve. Like I said, the signature, the DB, the list, systems were failing. Prevention and silos just crumble. Because now think of the scenario. I've seen the scenario happen personally, wherein a customer who has endpoint, IPS, and email from the same vendor, right? When an attack happens, they couldn't correlate between the three layers because each of them were working in silos. Because email works at the file level, and there is IPS which is looking at, or web security for that matter, which is looking at communication, IPS which is looking at deep packet inspection, and an endpoint blocks something. You can't correlate between the three and find out an attack. So prevention in silos really crumbled. Customers had to go through a lot of pain there. And that's when the cloud security came into picture, because people thought it is easier to correlate at the cloud layer than at each of these individual layers. And also that the whole way of doing cybersecurity changed, because we moved from the signatures and databases to behavior-based algorithms. Cybersecurity started adopting AI and ML algorithms. And when it started adopting AI and ML, obviously you need a lot of processing power, and cloud gave that power. And that's when cloud security came into picture. And I still remember nearly 9 years back, almost 10 years back, when I moved from an on-prem security OEM to a cloud vendor, almost all my peers said, you have to be raving mad. Nobody in India is buying anything in cloud. Particularly cybersecurity, no customer will buy in cloud. That's what people told me. And I said, it's exciting. It looks like it's going to be the future of cybersecurity. And here we are. It did turn out to be true. So cloud security today is, the most important piece in cybersecurity. And the focus shifted to mean time to detect and mean time to respond. As somebody spoke about incident response, as Shashank spoke about it, you look at it, mean time to detect and mean time to respond is the most critical metric today. The metric is not how many attacks I blocked. We have moved away from prevention because everybody understands that everybody understands that an attack is inevitable, a compromise is inevitable. Like John Chambers famously said, there are only two kinds of organizations that have been compromised and organizations that don't know that they've been compromised, because everybody else has already been compromised. And the modern day challenges that we see today, from a trends perspective, obviously the hybrid work. Today the users can work from anywhere, they work from everywhere, which means that the productivity becomes a key factor. Users should be able to connect from any device, from anywhere, and still continue their work. We cannot have another disruption. When the pandemic happened, I remember working, just last week, a few customers and I were actually having over lunch, we were having a laugh at it, saying the IT teams had it the most difficult during the pandemic, because all of a sudden everybody had to shift everything that was on-prem to cloud. And then I remember people carrying desktops homes. They had to carry their desktop home and set it up somewhere. And people scampering to get laptops. And once they got laptops, the next was connectivity. Once they got connectivity, they wanted to connect to applications. The applications had to be available. And at that point in time, there was a mad rush to adopt cloud. And in that rush, the security team also had to keep up. So the IT teams, we had to work, along with the IT teams until late into night to make sure all the security controls are in place. And that what it also resulted in is, the way you say it, it's either a diminishing perimeter or a growing perimeter. You can say that either the perimeter is now not there anymore, it's just diminished, because we have spread ourselves so thin. It's not just on-prem anymore. You're not, we have a separate network perimeter, there's a user perimeter, there's a cloud perimeter. Within cloud, we have multi-cloud today. We have adopted multi-cloud, which means each of those cloud have their own perimeters. So you can either call it as no perimeter, or you can say that it's a growing perimeter. And we have a growing OT IoT environment. Once again, I think almost a year and a half back, in a different forum, when I was talking about the trends that we will see, I said 5G will result in a huge amount of OT devices connecting to internet. There's going to be a lot of devices. Now the age of users is already done. This is going to be the age of devices that we will see with 5G being born. 4G brought in the users and the cloud applications. 5G is going to be the age of devices. So when you have, even today, you have your thermostat to your printers, to your refrigerators, to everything connecting to internet, everything connected to the network. Eventually, all of them will connect to internet. You will be managing all of them in your office through an app, or even at home. Today, you manage all of them through an app. So the OT and IoT environments, how do you really protect that environment? One of the most famous attacks started because a network connected refrigerator got compromised. Now, what do you have to protect that if it happens in your environment? And all of this together makes the infrastructure really complex. The infrastructure, particularly with multi-cloud to everything, makes it complex. And that's where it comes along with its own challenges, wherein there is an information and alert overload. You have so much of information today. In fact, in my line of work, when I speak to customers, The funny part is, when a customer, when you speak to them saying, how much of data do you generate in a day? When somebody says 100 to 150 GB, we're like, oh, okay, that's less. 100 to 150 GB of data per day being generated is actually less today. We are talking about, billions of events in a day. So data, and this, I'm only talking about security events and data. I'm not even talking about the normal data of the business data or the file information of an organization. Just the security data generated is around 150 GB today for an average organization. Imagine the number of alerts that a SOC analyst has to look at today. And what it brings in is that results in time and operational efficiency. Now, for the SOC analysts, a lot of times the SOC analysts are expected to be magicians, right? I mean, they're just expected to, whip their wand and address the issue. Whereas the fact is, they're looking for, they're perennially looking for, needle in a haystack. That's their job. They have to make sense of all the noise. They have to prioritize their time, their effort, and therein comes the operational efficiency. With all the convenience that we've brought in, we need more operational efficiency today. And obviously, the focus today is not just on pre, but also post-infection. You have to keep looking out for pre and post-infection. You have to focus on response, remediation, and recovery. Just response is not enough. And just remediation is not enough. Recovery is also, very, very critical. The response, the key focus of response is to minimize the impact. When I detect something, I want to make sure that the impact is at its lowest. And then comes the remediation. After remediation, I have to look at recovery. Now, those are the challenges that we have today. So where can CSMA actually help? How can CSMA help in addressing these challenges? And the key question is, why now? Right? That's the question that comes. Why is Gartner suddenly talking about, a mesh architecture today? What is the need? What has pushed that? As Harsh said, obviously, attackers don't think in silos. When attackers look at your environment, attackers are looking at it as one monolithic creation. As far as they are concerned, you are one entity. One vulnerability is all it takes. One hole is all it takes for them to break down the whole thing. And Gartner also acknowledges that. Gartner says attackers don't think in silos, but organizations are practicing security in silos. And like I said, the perimeter is now fragmented, almost non-existent. And multi-cloud has led to a lot of confusion when it comes to cybersecurity architecture. Previously, some 15 years back, when we used to go to the customer, the first question that we used to ask is, can you give me your network architecture? Can you give me your security design? Today, I can't even ask because there is no one design. There's no one architecture. Each environment has its own design, has its own architecture, has its own team. And there is no one consolidated strategy, one consolidated design. A lot of it happens ad hoc. And the cost of a security breach has shot up in a big way today. And that's where Gartner says, if you can adopt CSMA effectively, it would bring down the financial impact. You can continue doing this. Gartner says, Gartner doesn't tell you to, move to CSMA. Gartner just says, if you can adopt this effectively, then you bring down the impact. So what is CSMA? So there are 4 layers to CSMA. We will look at each of those layers. So the first one is obviously the security, analytics, and intelligence. Like I said, previously the problem was one layer finds out something is bad or an anomaly. Forget about something is bad. Today there is, good and bad is very, very, it's not really, I would say the focus, right? Good and bad is actually minimal. What falls in between, the gray area is the one, the suspicious is the one that has the capability to bring down the entire security force of an organization. So if there is an anomaly at one layer, do you have a mechanism do you have a coordinated mechanism to actually investigate that particular anomaly across different vectors in the network and find out more information and make a decision for yourself on whether it is good or bad? Let me take an example. Sometime back, I'm sure all of you know about this Swift fraud that happened, in which Bangladesh Bank lost $80 million. Now, I'm not going to get into specifics of that attack, but at a very high level, the attack happened during non-regular office hours. Outside of office hours, after the users all logged in the middle of the night, suddenly this transaction happens. And, with a particular user's identity attached to it. It's an anomaly. Now, when one of my users who is not expected to work in the middle of the night suddenly logs in and does something. Now, what am I supposed to do? It's just an anomaly I've got. I've seen a user log in at an unusual hour. Now, do I have a coordinated mechanism to really query and find out why is that user really connected or is the user not connected? Where is the user accessing this from? Which applications is the user accessing? Should I call up the user? If I call up the user, what if he doesn't pick my call up in the middle of the night? He might be sleeping. What if the user doesn't see his messages, mails? Then what do I do? Right? And that's where doing security analytics and having a central intelligence becomes a very, very critical part. You need to have a coordinated analytics and intelligence engine in your organization. And the second part is obviously the distributed identity fabric. Now, look at this mostly as, while the name suggests distributed identity fabric, I would say that this is more about ZTNA. This is more about zero trust than anything else. Verify the user at each level. Do not trust the user just because the user has been able to log into a VPN and just allow the user to access everything within the network. Now, typically zero trust has three primary areas. One is the workforce, which is the people, the workload, which is the applications, the workspace, which is the network. Now you will have to keep verifying trust at each layer separately. As the name suggests, in fact, I heard a customer saying zero trust is nothing new. We've been doing it for long, which is actually true. We've been doing that for long, but we haven't been doing that in such depth. We verify the user at one layer and then we used to allow the user to access anything. Like even today, I see customers saying, oh, my users have to log into VPN to access my application. Otherwise, they can't access the application. Just because somebody was able to log into VPN doesn't mean you give them access. The user might have logged into VPN, but do you want to give them access to critical information to their system without authenticating? If it's a user who's collecting that information, or if it is a malware that's collecting that information and pushing the data outside. So when it comes to identity, keep verifying the identity again and again at multiple layers. Look at distributed identity not as an access feature, but as a security feature as ZTNA. Then comes the consolidated policy and posture managements. Now, this is very, very interesting, right? Now, why do you need consolidated policy management? We have accumulated all these security solutions, best of breed solutions at each layer, over a period of time. Each of them have their own dashboards. Each of them have their own way of writing policies. Each of them have their own way of enforcing policies. But Gartner says now try to consolidate this whole framework. Why? Because each of these layers have to work with the other. Can an email, firewall, and endpoint today not talk to each other? They should be able to talk to each other. When you push a policy, you can't be logging into 5, 6, 7 different dashboards and push the same policy. And if it is you as one person, it's still okay. If you have different teams handling different technologies, if you have a separate email administrator, you have a separate endpoint administrator, you have someone for cloud separately, there's a separate team for firewall, which is the network team. And now if you have to coordinate between all these teams to push a policy, when you are under an attack, each of them will have their own process. Each of them, some of them will say, I need a change process if I have to update this policy. And somebody will say, I need my manager's approval. Why don't you send me an email? I will forward that email to my manager. And after my manager gives his approval, I will update. When you are under an active attack, every second counts. If you don't block that attack immediately, then the ransomware could spread from, let's say, 5 users to 500 users. Then the amount of work that you have to do has just multiplied by 100 times. So every second counts, and that's where having a consolidated policy and posture management becomes really critical. And lastly, consolidated dashboards, which would give you overall view of your entire network. You need to have full visibility of what's happening across your, not just your network, across your entire environment. Remote users, applications, cloud applications, on-prem users, on-prem applications, network, you name it, you need to have a consolidated view of your entire environment, including OT, IoT environments. So what are the key components of CSMA? So the first part obviously is data consolidation, right? You need to be able to have centralized visibility. Like I said, you cannot have visibility into every nook and corner. So you need to consolidate information first. Once you get information from all over the place into a single location, then you have more visibility. But more visibility also means, like I said, overload of information. And that's where you want to reduce the amount of work that a human being does. Do you want to throw more people at the problem? Because throwing people at the problem has never solved a problem by itself. It is like somebody saying, instead of having 100 people building a house for 100 days or 10 days, why can't I have 1,000 people build the house in one day? Right? It doesn't work that way, because the time the process takes, it still takes that amount of time. So you can't just throw people at the problem and say, now I have more people, so I will process more data. Which is why you need more integrated tools, which is why you need to build custom integrations, which is why you need to automate as much as possible. In fact, most of the attackers have already automated. If you think attackers are perpetrating attacks, manually, they are not. Most of the attacks are automated today. Attackers have their own automation running. Attackers know who to attack, who not to attack, where to concentrate, what tools to use. So you need to embrace automation too. And finally comes the skill set. Skill set to manage all of this. Yes, people are still very, very important. There's no question about it. And I will speak about it also a little later on, why skill set specifically, and how a lot of cybersecurity vendors tend to mislead the market when they speak about their own capabilities vis-a-vis the skill set. So just keep that in mind. So when it comes to CSMA, now, as I said, the first thing is I have so many different tools. Now, how do I adopt CSMA? The first one is the ad hoc approach, wherein I will say that, let me go ahead and start adopting CSMA by integrating all the security tools I already have. All tools that I have, I will start integrating. And then whenever I have to buy a new tool, I will always go and buy the best of breed product in each of them. Now, if you want to do that, it's perfectly fine, right? I mean, there's no right or wrong way of doing it. It's just how hard or how easy it is. Now, if you want to go the ad hoc way, these are the number of cybersecurity vendors that we have. So if you want to evaluate, find out the best of breed vendors in each of those and then integrate each of them with the other. I mean, of course, you could do that if you have the will and, the time and money to do that, right? An organization minimum would have some or all of these, in a lot of cases, much more than this. Like Ponemon says, an organization typically has around 40 different security products, security controls. Now, each of them working in isolation. Normally, what we think is, even if I have it today, when we speak about something, we generally tend to oversimplify things. We would think that, okay, CSMA means I just have to integrate these components with each other. And that integration would look something like this. I would say that it's as simple as this, right? I mean, I just have to integrate this product with the other. I can just do this integration and then the whole thing would actually look like this, which is not true. Your mind is actually oversimplifying it. The way CSMA would look like, if you want to do it, is like this. This is how CSMA would look like if you want to adopt it with your whatever you have currently. Look at the number of integrations that you have to make, the number of integrations that you have to maintain, and troubleshoot when something fails. I used to, I work for a company, a smaller company, which got acquired by a larger one. When the larger company acquired it, they just declared that the published APIs are being withdrawn because we are going to come out with a new platform. And after the new platform is stabilized, we will republish the APIs. Now, that took 2.5 years. All the integrations that customers had done using those APIs, they couldn't use it anymore. 2.5 years, they couldn't use it until we republished those APIs. So what happens here? Until yesterday, some integration is working fine and suddenly today it fails. You have to troubleshoot that and you have to find out where it went wrong. And it could easily become a nightmare. And that's where the platform approach comes in handy. Even as per Gartner, wherein Gartner says, once again, when I say platform, most people tend to think that a platform approach means I have to select one security vendor, buy all the products from that one single security vendor, stitch everything together. That is not the platform approach. The platform approach is for you to have one, or you can have multiple primary vendors to build your strategy around. You don't need to have just one vendor. You can have 3 vendors, 4 vendors that you finalize on, and then build the strategy around them. Why? Because it gives you a lot of pre-integrated, ready-to-use playbooks. The integration is already taken care of by them. The dashboards are already ready. You don't have to build those integrations. You don't have to build dashboards. You don't have to build consoles and consolidations. All of that is already there. You don't have to spend your time, your maintenance, or your skill in maintaining them. The typical concern comes, what about defense in depth? Defense in depth was valid when people were using databases. Today, it's behavior-based. So defense in depth by itself doesn't hold a lot of value today. But at the same time, when you're going for 2 or 3 primary vendors, you still have defense in depth there. And secondly, what happens? Most of the customers ask me this. Hey, what happens if one product is compromised in a platform, then the whole platform is compromised? Once again, which is not true. When we speak about a platform, now, a platform is not one single layer. It has multiple layers. There is an enforcement layer, there is a control layer, there is a management layer. So even if one product gets compromised, it's only the enforcement layer. Only that one single product is affected, not the other products from within the same vendor. Because the control layer and the management layer are still different from the enforcement layer. And the third point is, what will my auditors say? Today, most of the auditors also understand the need for consolidation. So even the Big Four have come to accept this particular strategy. And in fact, they themselves, propagate it today. And that's when you adopt a platform strategy, this is how the whole thing would look like. You have 3 different vendors. You can have, this is just suggested, right? Don't take it literally. You don't need to have these products from a single vendor, right? It's just suggested, which means you just have to integrate between the 3 vendors. The rest of the integration is already taken care of by them. Now, how do I adopt CSMA? When it comes to adopting CSMA, more than anything, my primary advice would be, or suggestion would be, look at it as building a team. If you are the coach of a football team or a cricket team and somebody asks you to build a team, right? How would you build a team? Because you have, great 11 batsmen, would you just pick 11 batsmen and put them on field? You won't, right? You would want obviously some 6 or 7 batters in there, and then you want bowlers, you want fielders, you want everything to work with each other. If the fielders can't really catch properly, if the fielders have butterfingers, then your bowlers are not going to be successful. If your bowlers are not successful, regardless of how talented your batsmen are, you're not going to win the game. And that's how you have to look at the whole CSMA. Don't look at each of the products in isolation. When you are looking at CSMA, look at it like you're building a team. And when you're looking at building a team, there are some parts which will be really strong, some parts where you probably, would say that, what, maybe this bowler is not as strong as my batsman is in terms of skill, but I still need this guy to be in the team. So you would pick that bowler, right? Similarly, even if within that primary vendor, you have to evaluate and see if the vendor doesn't have a particular feature today. But if the vendor gives you better value with integration, then you go with that. Look at it holistically. Don't look at it from an individual feature perspective. Look at it from your strategy. And there comes the critical question of who should be my primary vendor or vendors? Which are the ones? Now, there are so many different vendors around who come back and, they will say that, in fact, I've heard people say, security is a big data problem. Who understands data better than me? Somebody says, who understands network better than me? And somebody else says, who understands OS better than me? And taking security from me is the best thing. Now, remember the skill that I spoke about previously. So when it comes to skill, always ask this question to yourself. The next time when you have an opening in your team for a cyber security specialist or an analyst or SOC analyst, would you be picking a storage guy in the team? Would you be picking an operating system guy in your team? Or would you be picking a network admin in your team? Or would you pick someone with a cybersecurity DNA in your team? Now that's critical, because I've seen during critical times of an attack, different OS vendors to everybody actually struggles to identify an attack. Whereas a cybersecurity vendor has that DNA, which helps the cybersecurity vendor to actually identify attacks and help you recover from it. And what are the 3 key takeaways for me from this? First thing is think long term. At least in the medium term, at least until 2025. Look at it from that perspective. And secondly, automate. Automate as much as possible. The whole premise of CSMA is that you should be able to automate things and reduce the manual effort of people. So instead of pushing people to the brink, try and automate as much as possible. Automate integrations, automate response, take actions, automate as much as possible in your network, embrace automation. And the third one is the whole thing has to come together to bring down the mean time to detect and the mean time to respond. And that is that should be the key focus. So that's it from my side. If you have any questions, we'll take them now.
And Subu has given such extensive inputs, digging not into the what, but actually how of CSMA it really helps us. I will definitely cover up some takeaways later, but before that, we can have some queries and some inputs as well.
Yes, so participants, we have to integrate our queries also, so that we will be able to get a response from Subu. So whoever want to raise questions, put it in chat box or unmute yourself.
So till then, why don't I start, Subu? I'm sure the queries will start coming in. See, when we have understood so much about the different cornerstones, how we can start off in action, but I'm sure a lot of our friends here would be wondering what is the first step. Maybe there are, 4, 5 cornerstones, what matters, but how do we start this journey?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, right? I mean, because I didn't want to touch on tools in this particular session, so I didn't really get into that detail. But otherwise, I would normally say first thing to start off with, if you already have a SOC, the first thing to do is try to automate the SOC as much as possible. If you don't have a SOC, the first thing to do is try to have a SOC. But If in case, you do have a SOC, then the thing is try to adopt solutions like SOAR first. Look at threat intel platforms first. Having a threat intel platform and a security orchestration, automation, and response tool is going to be absolutely critical. Today, most of the XOR solutions can also act as a threat intel platform as a tip. So you should look at a SOAR plus tip kind of a platform to start off with, which will automate the responses, which will help you take action faster, which is the first step in CSMA. Because these are vendor independent, vendor agnostic. So regardless of what solutions you already have at the network layer or at the cloud layer, it doesn't matter, you can still integrate into this. And that is just the first step. But the subsequent steps is whenever you're looking at it, whenever you're looking at different tools to buy, different tools to replace, start looking at the synergies that these tools can give you. So there's a question about how much of foundational security helps in EC adoption of CSMA based approach. Yeah, so when it comes to foundational security, it's a bit subjective. It would really depend on what level of foundational security we are talking about here. I've seen, so far as it's flexible, it helps in adoption to a certain extent, but if it's too deep with each of those solutions, then it becomes a little difficult. Now, the foundations of cybersecurity still remain the same, right? The idea is to thwart the attackers as much as possible. The idea is to build a wall. If I have to borrow from Trump, you build a wall which is 30 feet high. It just means people need a 31 feet ladder. So for the attackers, they need to put in more efforts, right? But at the same time, eventually you will make it unviable for them. Eventually you will make it unviable for them to really put in that amount of effort. And then if in case they do choose to buy the 31 feet ladder and try to jump through it, you still need other mechanisms. But when it comes to foundational security, yes, it definitely helps to a certain extent. But CSMA might also require a gradual and eventual re-engineering of what you've done in your network. For example, let me take an example. I was talking about the Bangladesh bank attack until the next question comes in, right? I was talking about the Bangladesh bank attack wherein the SWIFT transactions happened during after office hours. Now, what could CSMA have done there? Now, let's look at this scenario from, Bangladesh bank did not have CSMA. So they found this out after they did a forensic analysis. They found out all of this information. By then, they had already lost $80 million. And how did they actually first find out about the attack? It was because of another, sharp guy who was sitting in a different bank who said, why am I getting so many transactions from Bangladesh bank? A guy who was completely unrelated to the transaction noticed it. Otherwise, they would have lost. The attackers planned on taking $1 billion out. They would have bankrupted that whole organization, right? Now, how could CMA have helped? The first thing is, it's an anomaly. Looking at a transaction happening after office hours and particularly persistently, if that keeps happening again and again, the second time or the third time. The first time, it could be just an anomaly. In all the noise, the SOC analyst could possibly choose to ignore that alert, saying, yeah, user logged in. What's the big deal? He logged in for 1 or 2 days. But when that starts happening continuously, then you start seeing the pattern. Now, the next thing is, I need to know, right? Like I said, I need to know if it's really the user or not. Why is this guy doing this transaction during after office hours? Now, how can I get to know? When I have a ZTNA framework along with something like, let's say, a SOAR, I would say that the first thing to find out is first find out if the user is connected to any of the other applications during that time. If the user is not connected to any of the other applications, how can a person be connected online and not connected to any of the other applications and just be connected to one application? is that, yeah, Harsh, you're on mute. Okay. How can the user be connected to just one application? Secondly, is the user actually browsing from his system at that point in time? Is his system reachable or not? Once again, when I have an integrated architecture, I can find out if the user is connected. I can find out what are the processes that are running in a user system and find out if the user system is even online or not. If the user system is not online, then the next thing I will do is find out where is this connection starting from? Is it starting from the user's location or is it starting from some other location? If it's starting from another location, then the other thing to do is automatically send an alert to all the applications, to the to EDR, to everyone, to quarantine the user. Ask the user to reset his password before he logs in. Enforce multi-factor authentication on the user, right? Now, with that, even though the compromise has happened, the impact would have been minimal. The impact would not have been $80 million if you had CSMA. Okay. In our experience, in certain areas, we see a deterministic approach yields better outcomes as compared to probabilistic approach based on ML algorithms. Your views, please. Yes, you're absolutely right. Which is the suspicious, like I said, the gray area, right? There is today the problem arises when I cannot say for sure something is malicious. Now, for that is where I really require the CSMA there. Now, one of the system flags off something as an anomaly. One of the system says that there is something wrong. Now, I don't know if it is actually wrong or not. I just know that it falls in the gray area. If it's malicious, it could have been blocked. If it is clean, it could have been allowed. But when it falls somewhere in between, as one of the SOC analysts, my job is to make sense of that whole thing, is to find out whether it is really good or bad. For that to happen, normally, if you see, it takes a long time. And it's very subjective. And that's where having an integrated threat intel platform makes a lot of sense. Because I would be querying, I don't have to go Google about that thread, Google about a particular file, or about a particular anomaly to find out what's happening. My threat intel platform will tell me what different vendors think about that particular threat. Has anyone seen it before or not? And I have more, in fact, from a CSMA perspective, now I have more points to actually investigate. From my SIM just gives me a log, an event, but I have to go beyond that. So I can use an XDR to hunt for threats and find out if, for example, let me take an example to explain it here. Let's say there is a particular connection which is to a malicious destination. Now, that connection has been stopped by your web security or by your firewall. You've seen that. But just a connection getting blocked means nothing. It means there is still something malicious inside. Otherwise, there would not have been a connection which would have started from your network. You still have to find out if that connection was accidental. Maybe the user went to some other site, got redirected, and it got blocked, which is fine. Or if it was a malicious process running in a user's machine, right? That's a threat hunting that you have to do. So the next step for you to do is find out which user. Once you find out which user, you have to find out which process within the user system. Was it the browser? Was it some other application which started that particular communication? Once you find out that process, you have to correlate that process to the file. Once you correlate it to the file, you have to find out how many users have that file. You have to find out how that file came in. Was that file downloaded by somebody or was that file emailed by somebody? Now, for you to determine all of this, it's going to take a long time. And that's where you really need the power of automation. And ML will definitely keep throwing up a lot of probable anomalies and probable threats. A lot of them would fall in that area. ML is known for it, right? But at the same time, that's where having the integration really helps. in you determining it. Now there is just one connection, you check that connection, and then you find out this is the particular process. Then you can do all of this from one single dashboard today. And you can automate this whole process by using SOAR. You don't even have to do it manually. You don't need your SOC analyst to do it. So when it comes to handling the approach of ML algorithms, the suspicious threats, automating is the best way to go, because a human won't be able to handle that volume of alerts. Harsh, you're on mute again.
Yes,
Yes,
we have one question.
Please, please.
Suhas has said how much fundamental security help in easy adoption of CSMA based approach.
Yeah, I mean, as I said, I mean, in fact, I addressed both the questions on chat, but just to reiterate, it does definitely help. It does definitely help, but it is very subjective as well. Sometimes, if it's adopted very well, it's when it comes to foundational security, the way it's been adopted by the organization, and if it's flexible, then it would definitely help in bringing in CSMA too. But at times it could require a complete re-engineering of what has already been done there. People would probably have to reimagine the whole thing that they've done already. To a large extent, yeah, having the policies and things in place, best practices, all of that helps. But as I said, I mean, it's very, very difficult because our data sharing mechanisms have changed. At a certain point in time, DLP could have been implemented very, very effectively, but not anymore, because your data just doesn't reside with the user anymore. There's a lot of data that resides everywhere, in cloud to applications to everywhere. So having a DLP, is not just going to be enough. You also have to cover, your network. You also have to cover your cloud. And that's where having a CASB comes into picture. Once you start talking about CASB, you start talking about, SASE. Once you start talking about SASE, you're already talking about VPNs. It is, as I said, you could start out as a small project and you could end up re-engineering your whole network, because all you wanted to do was just protect data at the foundational layer. That's what we are trying to do. In fact, even that is changing today. If you ask me, I've been saying this in multiple forums, protecting data is not enough anymore. You will see that in the next few years, as a user, there's going to be a lot of responsibility on each of the user. There are going to be repercussions for users for inviting threats into their environment. In a few years from now, you can't say that I just clicked on a link, I didn't know it would result in something like this. It's going to have consequences. So the users, we are going to look at, we are already looking at, if you look at it, we are already looking at user risk. We are already looking at device risk today from an industry perspective. And eventually, the user will have consequences to their actions.
That's so true. Just like we say, cybersecurity is not just a technology problem today. It will be converged with the people process, and it's going to, and it's a business enabler. So the problem is also business problem today. It's not just a tool problem. So that's so true. And I think, Subu, you gave us so many, amazing takeaways and lovely analogies. Trust me, given the story that you started with, I really loved that. Let me, quickly take 2 minutes to also, just, I've made some notes out here. So just in interest of everyone, I'll just share the thoughts. Amazing takeaways again, Subu.
Thank you.
Yes, in times like today, why cybersecurity is no more a question. That is where we have transformed the mindset change. But yeah, of course, the what, the digging into the, how, when is a question. And that's what we have been, digging deeper today also. And the reason behind this is today we have transformed from that database signature list, kind of prevention strategy kind of a thing to the, kind of evolved ransomwares. And with this birth of, kind of APT, zero-day threats, we are now talking about the identity threats, the risk-based approach, cloud with confidence has become a reality. And of course, with that, security at the speed of cloud has also become a necessity. Cyber threats, like we discussed and like very rightly Subu, shared, we have now crossed the stage from ransomware to extortion. Precisely the reason prevention in silos as strategy today fails. Let's not forget the business impact, the legal, the brand reputation, the impact that is coming around here as an economy, as a company itself. Yes, finance behind the attacks, the kind of incentives that these attackers are having, we cannot forget that. And equally, when it comes to us, the matrix matters, the MTD, the MTTR, these are few ones which does measure the impact of cybersecurity and the damage. Then Subu did cover a bit more on the modern ecosystem challenges as well from the hybrid IT workforce. It has benefits, but securing this benefit is another challenge. IT-OT convergence. So true. 4G has brought user and cloud applications, 5G, the interconnected devices. And I think there are some great examples also that Subu mentioned over here. Today, indeed, is the time we may either call it as a perimeterless era or a growing perimeter, because we have shifted from that traditional, data center to user, to internet, to identity, to data, to cloud becoming the perimeter itself. And in all of this, expecting a SOC analyst to really be a magician is not fair. Needle in a haystack. Yes, I really loved the story part quite a bit. And let's think on how we can balance the 3 R's: response, remediation, and recovery. That is how we can start working towards beating the 3S, the siloed visibility, the sophisticated threats, and the skill shortage. So yes, that has been really critical. And that's where we exactly started digging deeper into, what are those building blocks and the components. Very critical, centralized and coordinated security analytics and intelligence. This is the first step, which Subu also answered in the question. We need to work on the SOC, on the SOAR piece. That is how we start the CSMA journey in a simplified way. Distributed identity fabric. It was very critical to also cover the bit of the ZTNA story here. So yes, verify the user, validate the device, and limit the access privilege. Working on the workspace, workforce, and workload. All the 3 matters together today. Then the third equally important step, the consolidated policies and posture management. And let's not forget the consolidated dashboards that gives us that bird's eye view on the risky users, cloud, data, all of the important parameters today. So yes, this is the story that helps us to cover these parameters. And stitched with that story of the data consolidation, embracing automation. I think this is something, automation. Let's not forget that. With the integrated tools, people skill set, we had a couple of discussions out here as well. And the most important, actually, if we want to shift from CSMA approach to platform-centric security approach, keeping in mind there would be, a lot of times a total reimagining or re-engineering required. We really need to have the tools which can help you out, give those, integrations, third-party integrations specifically, the integrated consoles, the security playbooks, and much more. Breaking the myth, vendor consolidation is not the only basis of platform-centric security approach. The third-party integration can help you with 2, 3 or more players, but which rightly Subu said, those vendors, the cybersecurity DNA really matters out here. And I think then we had some very interesting queries also very well cleared by Subu. So a lot of takeaways for us. And I'm sure the challenges that we covered in the start was also well covered by Subu. Subu, I think you really did a great job, and a lot of pressure on you, but you really did great out here. Thank you so much, Mohan.
Thank you. The pleasure is all mine. Thank you, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So, before leaving, Vijaya, Satish, anyone, any comments for Subu?
No, we have covered a lot, and we stood the time. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And we will see you all in New Year.
Definitely. So once again, Subu, a lot of insights. Thank you so much. Have a great weekend, everyone. And let's continue to evolve and keep learning and growing just like cybersecurity. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Arun.